Plants vs. Zombies as D&D Monsters is a set of videos I made well over a year ago, and I really loved making it, my audience responded really well to it, and then I just kinda forgot about Plants vs. Zombies as a topic for a good long while. That happens a lot on this channel, because there are so many topics and series that I love working with, it's very easy to go a long time without going back to a certain topic, but hopefully this is proof that I do eventually get there. As voted on by my subscribers, we are doing Plants vs. Zombies, creatures, characters, whatever, as superheroes. And as a bit of a curveball for my superhero episodes, I'm going to have this be a banter episode, narrated by two of my own original characters. Good old Benny Shap, who's a mech maker that lives in a world with a whole bunch of superheroes, and Jake Tajin, aka The Kid. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's go!
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
And so the Mexican urologist says, that's one jalapeno. What's the matter? You don't get it? What? No, you just walked in here halfway through that joke. Why would... I'm trying to eat. No, I thought I'd come and keep you company, kid. I got to know your buddy Anna pretty good the other day, but I ain't chatted with you much. So, you want to hear a story about my crazy cousin who lives in a gated community where there's a whole bunch of wacky superheroes fighting off zombie supervillains? Yeah, kinda, but Sterling says I should be mindful when I'm eating and not focusing on other stuff. Well, that's generally good advice, but do you really want to do what's good for your digestion right now, or do you want to hear some stories about a guy who gives folks superpowers using vegetables? Yeah, okay, that. Great, because the first one of the kids I'll tell you about actually kinda reminds me of you. Personality-wise, he's more of a Nezuko Midoriya type, and you're more of a Percy Jackson, though. What? Who are they? The two different kids I made mech armors for once. Then why'd you say their names like I'd know who they were? A valid question that I'm gonna totally ignore and press on. See, this kid, Winter Shoot, lives in this town called Neighborville, and those all sound like super made-up names. All names are made up, kid. Anyway, Winter was only 12 years old when this supervillain mad scientist guy moved into his town, named Dr. Edgar George Zambos. He starts kidnapping folks from all around the town and experimenting on them to turn them into zombified, mind-controlled supervillains that'll do his bidding. A guy whose name is Dr. Zombos makes zombie supervillains? That's not his real name, right? I actually think it is. It seems like there's a whole lot of nominative determinism happening in this town. What the heck is that? Nominative determinism. It's this idea where folks will gravitate towards jobs and stuff that have something to do with their name. Might explain why my cousin in this town, crazed off David Shop, ended up being, a little crazy. Right, how does this all go back to your weird cousin again? I'm getting there, don't worry. So Zombos moves in, is a real reclusive guy in this big house, and soon after he arrives, whole bunch of zombie supervillains start popping up and causing lots of trouble. This kid Winter is one of the first people to realize that all the supervillains is connected to this Dr. Zombos guy. Problem is, his folks ain't really buying it, and the police don't want to hear the kid out neither. Luckily, he's got a whole bunch of siblings who believe him, and better yet, his oldest sister is already a superhero herself. Her name is Penelope Shoot, but she goes by Green Shadow. At the time, she wasn't spending a whole lot of days in Neighborville no more, but when her brother Winter calls her up, she's down to come home and look into what he's saying. Plus, turns out she gets her powers from a certain wacky guy that lives in Neighborville. Two guesses at who that is. Percy Jackson? Nezuko Midoriya? I think you're messing with me, but just in case, nope, it's good old Cousin Gray stuff. So Green Shadow comes back to her hometown and brings Winter and some of their siblings from the Shoot family to go see Cousin Greystaff. He's a pretty reclusive guy himself after he'd been building this company called Bloom and Doom Super Co. and was gonna make superhero formulas out of plants that anyone could take to give him superpowers. Problem was, he got shut down by the Superhero Corrections and Placement Foundation when it turned out what he was doing was actually gonna work. Those folks don't exactly want other folks selling superpowers to anyone who wants them. Don't you kinda do that, but just selling people mech suits instead of superpowers? Yeah, but I wasn't dumb enough to register my business and tell the feds what I was up to like my crazy cousin. I mean, by the way, he's not actually my cousin exactly. Greystuff David Shop is my third cousin twice removed. Twice removed because my ma twice had to remove him from our family Christmas parties for being too nuts. You get distracted super easily from your own stories, huh? You'll get used to it. Anyway, so all the Shoot kids go to Greystuff, and it turns out he's already wise to this whole situation. Dr. Zambos moved into this town partially because he knew Kristoff had moved there after his business had gotten shut down. Zambos knew Kristoff was gonna keep working on his super formulas, even if he couldn't sell them. So Zambos was gonna use his supervillains to steal Kristoff's work and make even more worse supervillains. But Cousin had already recruited some folks into town to help protect his home. He offered to give anybody a year's supply of super formulas to keep any villains from breaking into his house. That was all separate from how Penelope Shoot had gotten the powers from him though. She had gotten them years earlier. She had been his lab assistant when he was building his business, and he'd promised her stakes in the company as part of her payment. But when the company shut down and it was clear she wasn't gonna get nothing from that, he gave her a lifetime supply of one of his super formulas.
Okay, so wait, what could she actually do then? Were all these people getting the same powers from him?
Oh, no, right, no, glad you asked that, cause not at all. Kristoff gave Penelope one of his sorta standard power sets, you know, some of them duplicated up a little bit. He made her formula from modified shoot peas, which I assume is something he was doing as a joke, cause, you know, her name is Penelope Shoot. But seeing as how he's crazy, I don't know, maybe he didn't even put those pieces together.
How is he so crazy though? If he was smart enough to make superhero formulas, can he really be that nuts?
Hey, sometimes to be a genius, you gotta be a little bit nuts.
That sounds like something you would tell yourself a lot.
Ha! You got me there, kid. Anyway, Penelope's powers as Green Shadow are that, well, on the formula, her hands spawn these holes in them, and out of them she can shoot these projectile peas at super fast speeds, like pitching a fastball straight at someone's noggin. She could also charge them up with extra solar energy to shoot as an explosive precision blast sort of thing. On top of that, she had trained a whole bunch herself to be a real good fighter, seeing as how being a superhero was a career path she was pretty into. Lastly, the formula gave her the ability to use photosynthesis to charge up her powers even more, you know, using the sunlight. That bit was kinda standard between a whole bunch of the different folks that he'd given powers to, but the problem was, that meant they was weaker at night when the sun wasn't out. And eventually, Dr. Zambos got wise to that. So Penelope, Winter, and their siblings was all down to help Kristoff in exchange for superpowers. So that kid, Winter, got these ice powers that his sister had used a couple times before herself. Gave him basically the same powers as her, but with the ability to shoot freezing projectiles that could freeze his enemies in place. It did a whole lot less impact damage, but holding enemies in place to give the others a better shot at them was super helpful. He wanted to be a super powerful sort of guy, but knew that being of help to his team was more important than just being the big tough one who gets all the glory shots.
Yeah, I kinda learned something like that Wait, did Sterling tell you to tell me this story?
Course not, I ain't one to shove morals down folks' throats, but Silver did tell me about your little dragon hunt adventure, and it reminded me of this winter kid that my cousin had told me about. Figured you could relate to him a bit, so that is part of the reason I'm telling you the story.
Huh. Alright, but I am still planning to train up to be more than just the helper kind of hero, you know? I can be a helper and do some of the big stuff too, right?
Course you can, support folks can get the glory sometimes too. But anyway, all this was great with the shoot kids getting powers to help out, but like I said, then Zambos realized if he attacked at night, lots of the superpowered folks helping out Kristoff was gonna be weaker because the sun was down and wouldn't be there to charge up their powers. Kristoff did give this one gal the power to emit solar energy to charge up some of the other folks, but that wasn't gonna be enough. He also needed some superhero helpers that could thrive at night. Luckily, he'd worked on a formula for just that sort of thing, using different kinds of mushrooms as the base. He went through a whole lot of kinds of mushrooms before he figured out which ones he could work with to actually give people superpowers, I tell you that.
Is that maybe how he went crazy?
Nah, I think he was crazy long before that. It is apparently how he had his spiritual awakening though. Said he met his higher self and learned that all the hard stuff and challenges in life that we go through are things our soul decided on ahead of time that we would have to face to help us learn a lesson.
Huh. Like how everything that sucks is good for you.
Right, yeah, your buddy Anna says that same thing. Anyway, I'm trying to get to this real grumpy superpowered guy who signed up to help Cousin Kristoff. Albert Tylop was his name, and he was a real grim dude. He worked for a construction company just so he could be a part of demolitions. But I guess he didn't get enough of destroying things in his daily life. He agreed to help Kristoff if Cousin could give him some real crazy destructive explosive superpowers.
That really doesn't sound like the kind of person you should give superpowers to.
I agree, but it did end up working out. That guy was surprisingly helpful. He got the ability to create these crazy purple smoky explosions from his hands, and if he really needed to destroy stuff, like a whole bunch of zombie villains coming his way, he could create a way bigger explosion that shot from his whole body. But he would have to cool it for a while after using that, rest up for a little bit. He was just one of a whole bunch of different mushroom-powered heroes that Cousin Crazed made, and with them and the kids helping out too, even if they powers was a little bit powered down at night, they was able to take out all the villains that came for Crazedov's house after the sun went down. Of course, that was far from the end of the whole conflict. Zombo still had plenty of plans on how to take formulas from Cousin Crazedov. And it seemed like Cousin Crazedov really dug that whole explosive powers thing, cause he gave a different version of it, a flamier version, to another hero later on. Eventually, more folks started noticing what that Winter Kid had been saying, that Zombos was the source of these supervillains running around their town. So more folks started coming to Crazedov to get powers to help out.
Why wasn't, the army or something coming in? How is this zombie guy just getting away with this?
I actually got a theory about that myself, cause Neighborville was getting pretty nuts and I would've thought the Superhero Corrections and Placement Foundation would've stepped in. But this town is pretty isolated, so I'm thinking that foundation was using it as a sorta testing ground. They was letting Zombos do his villain thing and seeing what heroes that was popping up from Crazedov's work might be worth taking out of there and registering to be heroes to help out in another part of the world. All they'd have to do is replicate Crazedov's formulas to give to these folks so they could keep their powers forever. I do know some folks that became heroes during this whole thing in Neighborville who left the town eventually and is still doing hero work.
Who are these superhero corrections people again?
I'll tell you about them another time. Shady group of folks, but our group has actually made a bit of a tentative agreement with them now, thanks to me. They used to make it real difficult for me to go back to my home dimension, but now we built up a bit of a bond, and they know that we're good for the multiverse. Anyway, I'll tell you about one more of these heroes, cause she's a pretty crazy fiery lady. Funky gal who got her powers from a formula made from jalapenos. She ran a small Mexican restaurant in town that had been destroyed by some of the zombie villains, and she wanted revenge. She already had an explosive temper, so the powers she got just took her over the top. She basically had the same powers as the exploding mushroom guy, except had more fire to her explosions, and she could channel them into explosive beams to do more targeted damage. Plus, she could shoot fire to propel herself into folks and tackle them real hard.
Did these people getting superpowers ever think to just team up and take the fight to this zombie freak and end this whole thing?
Eventually, but they was all pretty scattered around at first. It was pretty chaotic in this town in the beginning. Cousin Crazedov wasn't exactly the best at organizing folks. When more and more people was coming to him for more superpowers, he was just kinda throwing them out to whoever wanted them like they was Tic Tacs.
That sounds super dangerous, but also pretty cool.
Yeah, that pretty much sums up the situation. But remember, all while Crazedov was giving folks superpowers to fight back, Dr. Zombos was kidnapping other folks to make into his own mind-controlled villains. I mean, they wasn't all totally mind-controlled, but, for the most part they was. Anyway, this fiery lady started going by the name Jalapeno, and she was real good at blasting through the villains on her own. But eventually she did team up with Winter and Penelope and them, and along with a few other folks, they did, as you said, they formed a super team that was gonna take down Zombos. Or at least they was gonna fight them off in a more targeted way. Come to think of it, I don't even know if they have taken him down yet. I should probably go in and check with Cousin Crazedov on that.
What? There's a town in your world that might still be being beaten up by zombie villains, and you haven't checked in to see if you can help?
I mean, yeah, I should get on that eventually, but if we get all hung up on every problem in the multiverse, we'll go nuts, kid. There's a lot of places that need our help. Part of being a hero means accepting that you can't save everyone everywhere all the time. If you try to, you'll go crazy.
Yeah, I guess, but are you just trying to turn this into a lesson to distract me from the fact that your weird cousin is probably in trouble right now and you're not helping him?
You are significantly more perceptive than I gave you credit for, kid. Good on ya. Now look at the picture of this fiery pepper lady.
And now I ask myself the question that I often find myself asking as I start filming my outro. Is my camera's facial autofocus function going to suddenly start focusing on the faces behind me and make me all blurred out while I'm trying to do this outro? It's entirely possible. But anyway, this has got to be one of my new favorite superhero episodes. I really enjoyed making these, and I think the art especially turned out super cool. And I'd love to make more if people are interested in this, and leave me some suggestions for what other plants or zombies you'd like to see turned into heroes or villains. Plus, if you want more superhero stuff, you might want to check out my episode from 3 days ago, my Marvel Heroes turned into DC Villains video. Or if you just want more Plants vs. Zombies, you might want to go back and check out the Plants vs. Zombies as D&D Monsters episodes. And finally, if you want more out of PopCross Studios, like a weekly podcast, access to high-resolution art a day before an episode comes out, all of my ink bundles, and to just generally support the channel so I can focus more on what you all want and less on what the algorithm wants, you might want to check out the PopCross Studios Patreon, linked in the description and the cards. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote by Hunter S. Thompson, which I will replace one of the words to keep it PG. And he wrote that I plan on skidding into the grave sideways, body used up, worn out, what a freaking ride. That might sound like kind of a weird one for me to end on, but I just have always felt that sort of way, where the day I die, I want to be going, oh yeah, I'm good to go. I've done everything I wanted to. I've left some awesome stuff behind for people. It's time to move on. I hope that lights someone else up the way it does me. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.